Hi everyone, it's me again, Swank Ivy, with another Letters to an Asexual, and this is number 98. Today I'm going to share an oldie moldy with you from OkCupid, which began with a man who apparently was looking for people who had a similar interest as him in Dance Dance Revolution. So he opened the conversation with an actual thing we had in common and quickly went into the usual annoying interrogation that people like him like to put me through on OkCupid when they haven't done their homework and read my profile or done anything resembling research about asexuality. So here is the conversation, and I will warn you that, number one, this does have a mild mention of, I guess, sexual abuse. Mild. And then also, I will say this has started to feel very repetitive when I have conversations with people who say things I've already addressed before. I'm pretty sure I haven't done this exact one, but as usual, there's a lot of the same notes in these messages. But I figured it's time to come back around to this one again because this is one about how he doesn't believe that it's possible for me to be as sure as I am about being asexual because I have never had sex with anyone, and therefore how can I possibly know? Like, we haven't heard that before, right? So I'll go into the conversation here, and then I'll see if I have anything to say afterwards. It could be that I just don't have anything else to say about this because I've covered these sorts of things many times before. So we'll see if I have any thoughts occur at the end of reading it. So this guy opens with, "Yo, have DDR on Xbox?" And I said, "No, I actually play it through an adapter on my computer." And he says, "Oh, cool." And I said, "Played today, in fact." He says, "Awesome. I'm pretty terrible at it, won't lie." And I said, "I'm good at it, won't lie either." And he laughed. And then I said, "I couldn't win a tournament, but I can pass level 9 songs." And he says, "Wow." And then says, "I have a question. It says you're asexual, and it also says you've never been attracted to anyone before." I said, "Yeah, that's right." He said, "But I don't understand how that's possible." I said, "That's the definition of asexual. Asexual people don't experience sexual attraction." He says, "I know the definition, but there has to be more to the story than you're saying." I said, "There's more to every story, sure. But if you're suggesting there's some cause to it that I'm not admitting, I think you're barking up the wrong tree." He says, "That's like someone saying they eat, but they're never hungry." And I said, "I don't have sex or desire sex, so that analogy dies." He says, "Okay, so that's like someone saying they're never hungry." I said, "I don't see the similarity." He says, "Oh, I do." And I said, "As a straight guy, you've never been attracted to another guy?" He says, "No, but I have been attracted to people." And I said, "Well then, you know what it's like to know you're not attracted to someone without ever trying it." He said, "They're both instinctive urges." And I said, "No, not for everyone." He goes, "Oh, it is. I think at one time you definitely were attracted to people." I said, "Sorry I'm screwing with your conception of how things are, but making things up in my past to explain it away so I fit in an existing box isn't the best answer." He said, "Well, I still say there's more to the story than you're saying." I said, "You can believe that if it makes you feel better. By all means, assign me abuse, sickness, or a psychological condition if it makes things easier for you. I don't think that's really fair, but I can't do anything about it. I've never really understood why some people are so attached to the idea that everyone is attracted to people because, well, that's how it is." And he said, "Because it is." I said, "Not an answer." And he said, "I think you've mentally blocked out sexuality. It's there. You're just not letting it come out for whatever reason." And I said, "Well, I'm telling you straight what my experiences are and how I feel. If you don't believe it, you can make any excuse you like. I don't feel blocked any more than a straight dude who's never had any inclination toward gay sex must have been abused to feel so close to it." He said, "So you're gonna go through life never having sex?" I said, assuming I never feel sexual attraction for anyone, sure. Why would I do something I don't feel like doing? And it's not the same as just not being open to trying a new food. I feel the same about trying sex as anyone would feel about trying it with people they're not attracted to. He says, sex is one of the greatest things, and you're missing out on it. I said, you're missing out on great butt sex. Ask any gay man. He says, maybe I am. I said, not being attracted to the person kind of gets in the way of enjoying such an experience, for me. He says, but I'm not missing out on heterosexual sex. I said, also, part of what makes sex great is that you want it, and then you get it. The satisfaction of the urge. He says, sure. I said, I'm not going to enjoy it if people don't attract me. He said, you might. I said, if one day someone does attract me, I'll trust myself to be able to recognize it. He said, you don't need to be attracted to the person for it to feel good. I said, until or unless that happens, I ask that you respect that I can speak for myself and understand that I'm not in denial, confused, or lying about my own feelings. In my experience, most guys don't care if having anal sex would feel good. The idea of having sex with another man is just too off-putting. I feel that way about all sex. It's just not a comfortable idea at all for me. And he said, it is. And I said, that obviously would get in the way of my enjoying it. And to tell you the truth, I'm kind of tired of defending the concept at this point. I didn't come to this conclusion out of nowhere, and I'm fine with it. That's the end of our conversation. I will point out, first of all, that these days I don't tend to bring up that comparison to gay sex, I guess. I don't want to use that as something that we can just assume straight guys would be disgusted by or repelled by, because not all of them are. Some of them, would be willing to try such things and don't automatically find it to be a gross idea. Plus, on top of that, assuming that somebody's going to find that gross is, not so great. Usually I have found it acceptable in the past to use that as a comparison because I'm dealing with so many very small-minded straight men who are just like, but this is just how it is, and that's how this guy came across to me, and I wanted him to think about situations where he knows he's not attracted to someone, and doesn't matter how good the promise could possibly be that maybe you'll enjoy this even though you are not interested in it. But it seems like the possible trade-off of that, like the idea of understanding it as disgusting, is just not a sacrifice I'm willing to make anymore for a logical point. Like, I don't want to have conversations where I say, wouldn't gay sex be gross? You know what I mean? It feels icky. So even though it probably makes the point really well for some guys who do think that gay sex would be icky, I don't want to lean on that or use them as an intellectual point, in a conversation like this. So that's why I don't want to do it anymore. And also, I don't think I really made the point in the conversation that I would normally make today if I was having the conversation, that saying you're not attracted to someone is not the same thing as saying that you wouldn't be able to enjoy sex. And most people, when they're talking about asexuality, are not saying, I know for a fact that I wouldn't enjoy sex. We're not actually saying that. Whether you can enjoy sex is a different thing from being asexual. And while some people, of course, will incorporate whether they're willing to have sex or whether they do have sex into their asexual identity and may depend very heavily on the I don't have sex aspect of the definition for them, it is true that also you can be an asexual person who subscribes to the definition that they just don't feel sexual attraction and may still have sex, may still even enjoy sex. That is still something that our community has room for. Every kind of manifestation of the definition is somebody's life. And, I happen to be an asexual person who is not willing to have sex and is not willing to experiment with those things because my feelings are very strong that I wouldn't want to have sex with someone I'm not attracted to, since I've never had anybody feel attractive to me. It's not something that I'm willing to try. And there are a lot of people pushing this narrative that it's such a compelling idea, people really enjoy it, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I've heard. It's not confusing to me at all. It's not a new concept to me. It's not blowing my mind that people are coming in and saying, yeah, but you could be missing out. We've heard. But they can't imagine for a second what it would be like to be us. They don't think it's valuable to think about our perspective, and they don't also think about what it is like for us to have to deal with attitudes like his all the time. The trade-off of, hey, I could be inspiring you to try something that you'll really like, versus the experience of having to deal with people telling you you don't know what's good for you your entire life. I'm about to turn 45 next month, okay? I have spent my entire life dealing with people trying to tell me that no matter what age I am, no matter how self-actualized I seem to be, no matter how much experience I've had in other avenues, if I don't agree with them, it must just be because I'm naive or stubborn or unwilling to open my mind to a new experience. And the most important aspect of being open to new experiences is a self-led reason to go forward into those experiences. I don't feel like I am blocked off from something like that. I feel like I would be able to go forward into a sexual relationship if I was inspired to do so by any cue from my body or my mind. But it hasn't happened. And I resent that there are so many people who are saying, if that hasn't happened to you, it means there's something wrong with you, and it means that you're going to have to force yourself, you're going to have to push yourself into these experiences because I value them, and I think that you must be empty if you don't value this or you're not open to including this in your life. I have met many, 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 many people who have sex lives who are not happy. It's obviously not something that is like a magic wand that's going to open your mind and open the future of your life to all of the happinesses that you've been missing. Conversely, I am a very happy person, and everybody who knows me knows that that is authentic, that I spend a lot of my waking hours spending my time exactly how I want to, and I feel very fulfilled in my life. I feel very fortunate to be able to say that. My life contains satisfying relationships on the terms that I have set, and that's all I want. What they don't seem to understand is if I were to have some kind of mind-opening experience where I'm going to include another aspect that I've never included in my life, that it would have to come from me. It would not have to come from some judgmental dude on OkCupid who's saying, yeah, but this is how it is. Sorry, but you're wrong. My experience defines humanity. Your experience defines a trauma experience, or there has to be something that explains not being like everyone else. It can't be real. There has to be something else underneath the surface that you're not admitting to, some dirty secret that explains why you wouldn't want this. And really just the only dirty secret I can think of is how many people I have had to entertain this conversation with and just try not to pull my hair out. How many of them I have dealt with without having any growth, without having any inspiration from them, without ever feeling respected, without ever feeling like they're not having this conversation with me because they stunningly think they have something to teach me And they've never thought about my experience at all. They've never thought about what it would be like to have people harassing you all the time, telling you that you're not qualified to describe how you want your life to be, that you're not qualified to understand happiness because it isn't what they expect. Throughout history, there have been people like us. Most of the history books will write us down as weirdos, and the ones that got famous and still never had obvious partners in their lives and stuff, they're kind of written off as eccentric weirdos who contributed to society in unconventional ways. But we've always been here. There have always been a subset of the human population who just don't form those kinds of relationships in a typical way. And it's just a normal variation. And the aberration would be trying to make every one of those people realize their happiness in the same way by grafting it onto them from outside, saying, I don't believe that you can be validated the way that you are. I believe that you need somebody to come in and tell you what to do, and you need to submit to that, and otherwise you're just stubborn. Otherwise you must be wrong about yourself and refusing to admit it. At what point am I to be praised for saying that I know myself? At what point could I be acknowledged as being the authority on my own experience? That has a lot of value. And it's just too bad that a lot of these people who do find fulfillment a different way than we do think that only their happiness is valid and definitive of the human experience. They say a lot of things like, how do you know you couldn't be happier? I guess the same way that a lot of young people who come into adolescence and realize they're sexually attracted to someone without ever having sex with them, they know they want to do it. They organically grow this interest in another human being that way. And if that didn't happen for us, if it didn't happen that way for us, if it didn't happen in a way that came from us and with our interactions with other people, it just seems very odd to say that they think it would still work for somebody to come in and say, well, you need to have this experience, though. You need to skip over the whole part where that desire grew organically as part of your maturation. And you just need to jump to the part where you have sex with people, and that will retroactively make everything else fill in. It just doesn't work that way. There are people who've been curious about sex, who never desired it, but were curious about sex and were willing to try the experience, and maybe they found that they didn't like it. Maybe they found that there was something that they liked about it. The important part of it is that was led by that person, that it was authentically driven by their desires, by something that they were open to and felt would be a growth experience for them. For those of us who don't need that or don't want that or think that it would be detrimental, we should be respected to be left alone to not pursue those things if we don't think that those would foster our growth. And the inappropriate level of investment some of these people have in whether we have sex is really baffling, but there are so many people out there who are inappropriately invested in whether we have sex with anyone and our happiness. I mean, there are some books that I really like that I promise you I have never gone after people who have not read them and said, look, you're not complete until you read this book. Why would you be so close-minded as to not read this book when you know it could open your life the way that it opened mine? Like, I've never done that. I've never been so arrogant as to say, since I valued this experience, I need to be obnoxious and dismissive about other people's lack of desire to read the book. to make sure that they have this experience pushed on them to the extent that they feel like they have to read it or else something bad is going to happen or they're going to have the fear of missing out. And those of you who are asexual who got, I guess, either talked into sex by someone or decided through your own devices that this was an experience you wanted to seek out, a lot of you have probably come out the other side not having found something that you enjoyed and still having people say, you did it wrong, or it was the wrong person, or you ruined the experience by expecting to hate it. All of these things are things that I've said before. All of these things are things you've heard before. But the fact remains that if we try to have sex with someone and we still don't like it, that's not ever enough for these people. We will continue to hear this, but you have to, but what about, until we did theoretically find something that we liked in the sexual arena. It would never be accepted as valid that we did enough unless we stopped being asexual. So the fact that some people do change their sexual orientation at some point in their lives and realize, you know what, this either was a fluid thing or I was incorrect that it described me, but the fact remains that lots of people are legitimately asexual and lots of people stay asexual their whole lives, and that is also fine. So I guess my message wrapping this up is just that other people telling you that this is a valuable experience to them doesn't mean that you should therefore be obligated to seek it out or that you're closed-minded if you don't. Other people are closed-minded for expecting your mind and your body and your emotions to work exactly like theirs, and for not accepting that you could be different and that you could be happy the way that you are. So that wraps this up. I will be with you next time for number 99, and I don't know what I'm planning to do for 100 letters to an asexual, but hopefully I'll think of something. Thanks for listening. Bye.